Hello, and welcome to the Agribusiness Global Report. My name is Sarah Webb, and I'm editor of Agribusiness Global and host of today's show. In this segment, I speak with Mike Snyder, president of Red Rocket Consulting, about recent difficulties in sourcing ag inputs, how companies can effectively respond to this situation, and more. Thanks for joining. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you talk to me a little bit about what ag inputs are currently the hardest to source into the U.S. and which products are most vulnerable to import disruptions right now?
Sure. I can tell you from what I've read and what I see in the marketplace, fertilizers now are becoming a real problem, right? Because of the war going on in the Strait of Hormuz over there. And a lot of the nitrogen comes from that region, so they're the most affected. The biggest product that I deal with primarily is glyphosate. And the war doesn't have as much impact on that as it just does on, the transportation costs. But what we've seen in I'm going to say the last 6 months, the supply has, for one reason or another, dwindled quite a bit. So we're running I think about 60% of the normal supply in the marketplace. And this could be due to China restricting the amount of exports, the tariff issue, reducing the profitability for exports for these Chinese companies, but we've had a lot less supply. And then simple supply and demand issues have taken effect. As you reduce supply, prices have gone up. And as we all know, there was tariffs in a lot of products out there in the marketplace. So that impacted price initially. Then when the tariffs went off sometime mid-February, we all expected a price decrease. Well, that didn't happen. What happened is immediately the price went up more than 10%, and we saw another 5 to 10% increase in pricing, specifically around glyphosate. But I've seen the same trend with a few other products like bifenthrin, Lambda on the insecticide side.
Mhm.
Farmers are going to see an increased price on that. I don't think they even realize it yet because it's normally a rescue product at that point in time, right, with insects. So they're going to see an increase in that just because the supply is down and prices are up.
Okay, that's good to know. And up to this point, how have industry players been responding to these sourcing issues?
Most of them just reacting to pricing. Okay. I think most people are, if you look at, and I specifically talk primarily around glyphosate, but I think the trends are the same in many products. In the fourth quarter of this year, prices were pretty good. So a lot of people took early production or purchases and inventory. They didn't take a lot of stock because they knew prices were down and trends were going to go up. And then they really started to spike. So a lot of people were really concerned about buying in that December, January timeframe from, again, it's not going to start moving to the farmer then. So they didn't want to get stuck with holding high price cost inventory. So people were reluctant. So now the prices have continued to go up, and then there was a kind of surge of purchasing starting in that February, March timeframe, as some of the southern markets started to use glyphosate in those areas, and now we're seeing it through the Midwest markets. Prices have leveled off, but I think a lot of suppliers stopped purchasing and tried to watch what's going on, and then immediately started pulling things out of the market. And we were low on supply to begin with, which
Mhm.
just then increased the demand on a limited supply. And again, prices went up, and we're seeing that. It went up another 25% since the 1st of January. It seems to be holding off right now at this point in time, maybe even tweaking down a little bit, which is always the worst thing going in season is having prices start to drop, meaning people that pre-purchased are being punished versus the ones that just purchased just in time. And it
Mhm.
makes the market kind of work just the opposite of the way it should be in those cases. They're rewarded for holding and not purchasing. So hopefully we don't see a significant reduction as we get here into the most of May and June when the pure application season comes to the farmer level, but we'll see what happens in the market.
Okay, and I know it might be difficult to predict obviously what's going to happen next, but do you have any insight in how this might play out over the next several weeks or even several months?
Again, speaking of glyphosate, that's where I've got my most focus on. We're starting to
Mhm.
see raw materials come down a little bit. Glycine, yellow phosphorus, those things are really the leading indicators. And as those products start to drop and demand on those drop a little bit, then you'll see prices drop. So I expect to see things soften up just a little bit here. It just
Okay.
depends now. That's the production side of it in China. You got 30 to 60 days before it gets here. Most product in the US is priced based on current pricing in China. So we could see prices soften up here just a little bit based on the what we're seeing in raw materials. Now, what's interesting is imports. We get the import records from Jim DeLeese, and we were significantly behind on inventory this year. Last year was just the opposite. Jim was saying, "Hey,
Mhm.
watch it. There's, 50% more than normal sitting in the inventory in the channel." But this year it's just the opposite. We're seeing a lot less. But starting in April, we started to see significant inputs coming into the US trying to catch up, obviously,
Mhm.
and you throw higher prices on that and people tend to hold back. It tends to stagnate the market just a little bit. It's just, again, it's not a normal economic cycle. But I expect to answer your question, we expect to see prices drop a little bit here, maybe 5%.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. And do you have any other advice for companies and, dealing with this evolving situation?
The best way, and I was at, I hate to shows my age, UAP, now Nutrien, right, in the purchasing
Mhm.
role. And in a market where prices are dropping, you just have to buy short volumes or small volumes of inventory and kind of stair step this thing down if you're in the retail market and just, watch the pricing. At one point in time, it'll start to go up. I don't expect that'll happen until late July, August timeframe, if it does. But
Mhm.
going into the season, if you don't have inventory, don't buy more than what you need in the next 2 weeks and watch the market then and play the market based on pricing that way. If it were reverse, if the markets were starting to increase dramatically, then you want to take as much inventory, right? It's a little
Mhm.
different ball game. But in this situation, they should stair step their inventory down.
Okay. And Mike, is there anything else that you would like to add or anything else you think our audience should know?
Just that, this is going to be a real tough time for farmers. It's almost the perfect storm. And what I mean is, the commodity prices are low. We all hear that. Costs are going up.
Mhm.
Pesticides aren't as big of an issue for them as is fertilizers. They just missed the perfect storm from a negative perspective. If the war and everything would have started in May and July of the past year,
Mhm.
before the purchasing season, most of these fertilizers, the farmers would be just caught completely off guard and the profitability would have, I don't know how anybody makes money today. I use 450, 475 as just kind of a benchmark of where costs are for most corn year to year. Well, we're at that price, so they're barely breaking even. I think they skirted the increased fertilizer prices this season, but if
Mhm.
the war continues and the issues out of the Middle East stay bad through August, then you can expect a huge spike, and who knows what'll happen to commodity prices, right? But that'd be the one thing I'd be really watching is just the farmer situation and profitability, and they're going to be forced then to really manage the next dollar spent dramatically.
Okay, absolutely. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that situation as well. And, thank you again so much, Mike, for joining me today. I really appreciate your insights.
No, appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for tuning into the Agribusiness Global Report. I'm your host, Sarah Webb. Until next time.